Sloan, and I have the distinct pleasure of introducing Ray Hensberger, who is a principal and data scientist at Booz Allen Hamilton. Today's panel on turning data analytics into sports analytics will be 30 minutes, including Q&A, but due to the time run over from the last panel, we'll kind of give it a little bit of a buffer. I'll let everyone know when last question, but without further ado, here's Ray.
All right, thank you. Thanks, everybody. So Ray Hensberger, Director of Sports Analytics at Booz Allen Hamilton. How many of you have heard of Booz Allen Hamilton? Wow, okay. I was actually expecting like 3 hands to go up, and then this is great, good. So you may or may not be wondering sort of what we're doing here, or what I'm doing here today. We're known for a management and consulting firm. It's what we do, it's what we're known for. We're about 22,000 people large, of which around 600 of the best technologists and data scientists you could ever meet are part of our analytics group, and that's where I sit. So in our analytics group, essentially our goal is to transform industries and companies through data science, finding undiscovered insights in unexpected places, and creating value for the world's best organizations. We're insanely passionate about data science, so just to let you guys know, just a quick minute here on this. We host things such as the National Data Science Bowl or the Data Science Bowl with folks like Kaggle, if you're familiar with the analytics world. Hopefully you've heard of them. We also put out lots of thought pieces. We've written a book on data science called The Field Guide to Data Science. We just put out the second version this past fall. It's free, PDF, go online, check it out. In our space here at the Data Science Interactive, we've got copies of it, hard copies of the books to hand out. You're more than welcome to come check them out, talk to us, see our space there. As consultants, management consultants, technology consultants, and what we do, a lot of people know us for what we do in the government. So places like the Department of Defense, right? Working with surface-to-air weapon systems, working with cyber attacks, exploitation, defense, and that's great. When it comes to analytics in that space, you can imagine the data gets very complicated. So over the years, we've developed what we say is data science, right? And that's what the book is all about that we have. Data science, with lessons learned in terms of how to do it, the processes involved in doing it, pulling together the right data, the right people, and the right technology. Not just the technology that generates the data, like the weapon systems, for example, but the technology that actually takes advantage of the data, that you can do your analytics on, that you can scale as you need to, bring it down as you need to, deal with the complexities, and correlate everything that you're looking for. So we've developed a lot of lessons learned. We've been doing it for a long time. I've been at Booz Allen for 11 years now, and I've been involved in this space ever since then. So that being said, what we're doing is we're lifting all of that knowledge and all of those processes and that military-grade technology in our way of achieving data science, and we're dropping that into the sports world. Okay, Ray, get on. What's this have to do with sports science? Why are we all here today to hear about sports science? So sports science, let's take a look at what it is, where it came from. It's really, if you think about it, ESPN has a clips they show. There's a show about sports science, and it's highlighting sort of this futuristic view of an athlete and how they perform. And we're all, infatuated by it because how do these athletes do what they do? Physically, how are they built? What's the launch angle that comes off of their arm when they shoot a basketball? What's their rotation look like when they're throwing a ball? When the forces involved when they get hit. So they bring athletes into this lab, right, in this TV studio, and they strap on all kinds of stuff, and they put all these cameras in place and spend a lot of time analyzing the video to come up with the show and what most people know in pop culture is sports science. If you really break down sports science, ultimately, it's understanding the athlete. So not just the physical structure or just the body in motion, but also things like biochemistry. What's their blood saying? What's their DNA makeup? Mental makeup? What are they thinking? How do they think of things? How do they process information on the field or on the court or on the ice rink? I mean, you name it, whatever venue fits the analogy there. Optimize health, performance evaluation, and inform game strategy. That's what you're looking to do with sports science once you can understand your athletes better. That's really sort of the holy grail. So, okay, that's sort of the futuristic view. It's actually becoming a reality, right? So today, we're moving out of the TV studio, and we're moving much more closer to on the field, what's actually happening on the field and in practice facilities. I mean, Let's just look at the wearables, for example, and you guys walk around the hallway here, you'll hear it all week, and there's lots of panels, and part of what I'm talking about today is the wearables, right? Folks like Catapult, Zephyr, Omega Wave, Push, and even the big guys, Under Armour, Nike, Adidas, they're all playing in this space. That's the big focus on sports science right now, understanding just the physical movements in practice, for example, or in training, building these athletes to be what they can be and understanding why they're doing what they're doing and how we can make them even better than they currently are, if that's possible. So we start to get this data from the technology that's part of these practice sessions, and you start having things like, okay, what about in-game? Because wearables aren't exactly in-game yet. Well, look at NBA Sports View. They were one of the first ones to roll out what it looks like to see a basketball game as data points, right? So every player on the court, every ball, pass, movement is tracked through the camera systems they have. Teams have access to that data. MLB StatCast, another one that rolled out. Pretty impressive. They do a lot of cool graphics and things with that. Similar thing though, right? All the players on the field, where's the ball going, the rotation of the ball, how the ball came off the bat. You name it, that's how they're tracking it. And now you got the NFL with NGS, right? Next Gen Stats, RFID in the shoulder pads, players moving, where are they during the game? How fast did they move? They went from one direction to another, who was where when? It's starting to allow us to track and measure the game in ways we weren't able to do before. So if you apply data science, the data, the technology, and people together, you get this sort of world of, well, take the practice data, match it up with what's happening on court or on the field, and now you have a view of your team and your athlete, a lot better view than you had in the past. And with increasing available data, you see teams starting to take advantage of this and are starting to have a lot of success. Case in point, let's look at the NBA champions, right? So the Golden State Warriors. You talk about data and technology and what they're doing. It's nothing too crazy right now, but through a daily questionnaire, they're understanding their players, right? How are you feeling? Are you tired? Are you sore? What's your mood? Just tell me what you're thinking every day so we can understand where your head's at. They also have access to sports view data, and they get practice wearable data as well, right? I believe they have Catapult in there. So the understanding through the GPS accelerometers and practice, how the players should be moving, what the ideal situation is for them. Well, coming out of a 6-game, 9-day road trip last year, the data was starting to raise some red flags, right? So players may complain every once in a while, but they were complaining a little bit more than usual about the soreness and the fatigue. Okay, but you're an athlete, suck it up, right? Well, start looking at the sports view data. They started looking at the practice wearable data. Things were not going so well, right? They weren't quite moving the same way in practice, as quickly, as efficiently. Their fatigue levels were not looking too good. And in the game itself, same thing. They weren't playing and performing as well. So flags started to go up. Head coach Steve Kerr got that information, right, and decided to do something about it. So what did he do? They were in a good place, right? I think they were at 51 wins at this point in the season. Decided we're going to start benching our star players. We got to give them a break. We got to give them rest. We got to let them recuperate a little bit. So what was the response in that? Well, on Twitter, they were getting messages like, hey, nothing like spending $250 on tickets for my son's 7th birthday, only for you to bench his favorite player. Thanks, Steve. The fans weren't exactly happy. I think Steve put out an email, though, kind of letting people know. And ultimately, what was the result last year for him? I think this fan in particular was probably happy with the end result and could hopefully suck up the $250 that happened. But it points something out that I mentioned the word, or I mentioned it now anyway, injuries, right? Sports science is very much focused around injuries today. When you look at where it is today, and you look at the technology you can bring in today and what you can use as a team and the data, you can focus it around injuries. And so it's understandable, right? Injuries aren't necessarily a good thing, and are they ever really a good thing? Especially if you start talking about, there's freak injuries, someone breaks their arm, whatever, but if you talk about soft tissue injuries, so ACL tears, Achilles tear, right? Is there a way to see if an athlete's actually more vulnerable to that than other athletes? Can we avoid that? Can we avoid risk and injury more so than we do today? Can we mitigate it better? These are all fair questions, right? Achilles accident, something happens, you blow it out, that could end your career. It's probably at least 14 months for most athletes. So, if you can avoid that, there's a lot of reasons why he'd want to avoid it. Injuries aren't only affecting the team's wins necessarily, but it affects the teammates as well. So a great use case of that, if you look at the 2014 season, two gentlemen up here, Terrell Suggs on the left and Elvis Dumervil on the right, they were the best sack duo in the NFL. They led the NFL with 29 sacks in 2014. That's 4.5 more sacks than anybody else in the league that year, any other duo. They were the best duo. So lots of expectations for last year, right? High expectations. We're going to have even more sacks. The pressure's there. We're able to figure this out and put a lot of pressure on other teams. Well, Suggs goes down week 1 against Denver with a blown-out Achilles. By the way, it's the second time he's blown out his Achilles in his NFL career. It's interesting. Maybe he's more prone to that. I don't know. I'm not saying he is or isn't, but that's something that should be looked at, you would think, right? So he blows out his leg. Not only does it affect the team, but that 29 sacks they had, Elvis Dumervil had 17 of those in 2014. Last year, he only had 6 total for the whole year. And he played 189 more snaps than he did the year before when he had those 17 sacks. So the impact of an injury isn't just to that individual player. It's obviously to the team. It's to the numbers. And the Ravens finished, I think, 5-11 last year. Didn't go too well for them. There's a lot of other reasons that play into that, but this certainly didn't help the situation. So it hurts the team, don't get as many wins. Guess what? There's financial impacts too. If you just look at the 2013 season, MLB teams spent $665 million on salaries of injured players and their replacements. NBA teams lost $358 million. NFL starters missed around 1,600 games that year. It's just incredible impact to the game in and of itself, especially with the players getting salaries they do today. You want them on the field. Fans want them on the field. Teams want them on the field. They want to be on the field. Injuries are obviously an issue to deal with. They're normally bad, and I'm not going to say any injury is ever good, but they can be a good thing in the long run in certain situations. And actually, there's a really interesting use case of sort of an unfortunate injury that's leading to now an MVP season. I don't know if you all got it, but ESPN's analytics issue that came out on the front here, it's focused on the NBA and using biometrics, biomechanics to better understand the athletes. And there's an article in there that talks just about this exact use case. So Kawhi Leonard plays for the San Antonio Spurs. He's benefited from NBA's investment in sports science, right? So I showed this picture earlier. This is from the ESPN Sports Science launch angle, right? Ball coming off his hand. But NBA has invested in this area pretty significantly, and it's reaping the benefits. In 2014, Adam Silver, the commissioner of the NBA, he went and said, hey, for our combine, for looking at new athletes coming in, we want to bring in sports science. We want to better understand them. So we're not just looking at, if somebody can jump and how high they can jump, but how do they land, right? And then when you look at how they land, how fast can they then turn around and jump again? How quickly do they do that? What's the explosiveness look like? So using things like plates on the floor that can understand how you land. It's not just to see your explosiveness and sort of the pressure there, but when you land, if you land more on your right foot than your left foot, that may say you are favoring your left ankle a little bit or some part of your left side of your body, right? It's an imbalance there. Why is an athlete doing that? And maybe it's not something that's bothering them at all, and they don't even realize it. But in the long run, if they continue to have that habit of favoring that foot, it can lead to an injury or makes it weaker for them, right? So understanding that is actually starting to play a key role. And if you look at Kawhi Leonard, back in 2012, his second NBA season, he was sidelined for 18 games with a quadriceps tendonitis in, I think it was around his left knee. And as he recovered, he started using sports science to understand those imbalances. Now, he's a freak athlete, right? So they call him the Claw, and there's a reason why they call him the Claw. He stands 6'7", which isn't extremely tall if you think about NBA athletes. He doesn't stand out that way, but his wingspan is 7'3", right? 7'3", like, that's wild. His hands are almost 10 inches from the base of his hand to the top, right? 10, I don't even know mine, I didn't measure it, but it's definitely not 10 inches. Wide, over 11 inches wide. It's almost a foot wide, left to right. So you can see why they call him the Claw, right? I mean, the name makes sense. He's a freakish athlete in a good way, as it is. And when he got injured, the Spurs sent him to a sports science institute and to look at, okay, let's get your quadriceps healed up, let's get it back in place. He didn't just focus on the quads, though, and just his one quad to get that better because he wasn't able to move it for a while and it hurt, right? But he focused on his balances in terms of his body from left to right. Can I not only run straight forward and can I jump, but can I move left to right? Can I move as quick to the right as I can to the left? Do I have as much power going both ways? Start thinking about balancing your body out, and you start to overlay through cameras and through the data collection points that you can do with sports science, his mechanics on top of what the ideal mechanics would be. You can start to coach him in strengthening his body overall, being more balanced, and being a better athlete. And that's exactly what he did. He put a lot of hard work into it, and so you can actually coach athletes into this. Not every athlete's going to take to it, but those who do will start to form new habits, and they'll certainly reap the benefits of it. He's having an MVP season, right, if anybody follows basketball. So, thanks to an unfortunate injury, hard work, and sports science, he's putting it all together. It's just a great example of what can be done. So, okay, talked about injuries, and that's where sports science is focused today, the wearables, the data on the field, the data in the court, on the ice, wherever. Okay, that's where we are today, focused around that. So where is this thing going? Where is it headed? Again, we go back to what a great sports science capability, a great sports science institute should be able to do. You're talking about the physical structure of an athlete, understanding their body in motion, biochemistry, mental makeup. I really only touched on a couple of those areas, but not too deeply, by talking about the wearables and injuries. So think about biochemistry for a second. There's some pretty crazy stuff going on out there now that'll lead to the next evolution in this holistic view of sports science. They're taking DNA from athletes and starting to look for strands of DNA that will make you, is there anything in your DNA that makes you more vulnerable to a certain type of injury, to soft tissue tears? I'm not going to tell you that that is the case or isn't the case, and there's a lot of research being done on it, but that's an interesting way to start looking at biochemistry. Think about the impacts of that to the game, or being able to understand your team and put that together with what's happening on the court, how you train individual athletes, and understanding your entire team. Start mixing in some of the biochemistry. If anyone went to or heard about or looked into CES this year, Consumer Electronics Show, you saw some things around sports, right? A lot around wearables, but also wearables that are things like patches you can put on. Start to understand the perspiration coming off your body and look at your glycemic levels, right? The different ways that you are hydrated, your electrolytes, everything about your body can now be done with saliva or sweat, almost. I mean, there's a lot of things from a biochemistry standpoint you can start to understand by using these new technologies that are coming out, right? If you think about the mental makeup of an athlete, you want to understand what they're thinking, what they're doing. Research now, areas and some stuff that we're starting to explore into, is understanding this part of it, cognitive computing almost, right? And EEGs, right? So the brain, what's the brain doing? What's the signals? What's it telling? Brain's a very complicated part of our body. We don't fully understand it. But if you can see, just look at the patterns and signals in the data. Take Peyton Manning on his rookie game, run him out on the field, and if you can understand how he's processing that game, right? Not necessarily down to the level of detail of every single play, but understanding just what his mind is doing throughout the game, how he's doing that, compare that to the other athletes around him. I guarantee you, if you looked at Peyton Manning at Super Bowl 50 and his reaction and how his brain was functioning and how he was thinking and understanding the game, totally different than when he went out there as a rookie. Totally different than college, right? He's evolved, he's adapted. And to understand how that happened is something that's very interesting. What will it lead to? Again, not sure what to say, right? But I think if you start to think about how you can understand someone who has a mental makeup that's similar to Peyton Manning at a very young part of their career, think about the draft prospects around that. And it gets beyond just scouting, right? There's sort of this gut feeling, eye test world that scouts live in today, and we're moving away from that. It's not going to replace scouts by any means at all, but it just augments and sort of supports them in what they're deciding and what they're looking at, and they can pay attention to other things and not have to think about every single detail of an athlete. Body in motion. So markerless motion capture is actually a really interesting technology, and we have it on display in our area if you guys come by and see it. You can test out your cornhole swing, We've got a couple cornhole systems set up there, and we've got the camera system set up to capture the data. The markerless motion capture is another interesting area that's actually a lot closer than some of the things I just talked about. You don't need to put the sticky balls on people anymore to measure where their extremities are and how they're moving. You can do it with camera systems. Think about the Microsoft Kinect and similar technology to that. Why is that important? Well, if you think about a pitcher throwing a fastball and understanding their biomechanics of that, you talk about their form, how their shoulders need to be square, when their foot plants happen as compared to the release of the ball. There's a lot of things you can start to understand. Works great in a lot of different situations in sports. If you can understand that, and you don't have to pull the pitcher necessarily at a 100 pitch count, you know when his biomechanics or when his mechanics are going to start to break down. And you can start to inform your game strategy, inform yourself of when someone is potentially going to be injured or what just their natural baseline of how they throw a ball or how they interact with the game looks like. It's not the same model for everybody. It's going to be different, right? A sidearm pitcher is going to be different than an overarm one, right? Someone throwing the ball. So you can't think of it as a one-size-fits-all solution for any of this. The beauty of all this is the data that's coming out of it, right? And so taking advantage of the data, understanding that and layering it on top of the in-game data with the practice data, understanding the athlete is the next step in all of this. And you can't get anywhere without good data. Going back to the markerless motion capture, there's someone that mentioned to me once, well, I can see when someone drops their elbow. Quarterback drops back, he throws the ball, I can see when he drops his elbow. Okay, that's true. You can see when he drops the elbow. But did he drop the elbow 3 inches or did he drop it 3.5 inches? Does that make a difference? May for somebody, may not for someone else. It could be the difference when you're throwing a long ball of getting the ball over the tip of the fingers of a defensive player versus a complete pass for 60 yards, right? It depends on the player, but these are the types of measurements and fidelity you can start to get now with the technology. So getting back to all this technology, right, again, it generates the ones and zeros. It's the data that comes out of it. And, when it comes to sports science, there isn't going to be a one-size-fits-all solution to making sense of all of it. You got to get the right data off the technology. You've got to get the technology in place to deal with the data, understand it. And you have to have the right people to make sense of it, the scouts to tell you what the data is actually showing you, the people to make decisions about it, like the head coach of the Golden State Warriors. You have to have people involved. This isn't a people replacement process. It's an iterative process. You build predictive models, you use machine learning, you build models around the data based off of what you're learning, and that's the data science process. And without the data science process, we're not going to get to the sports science that we all love and dream and want to see happen. It's integral. You got to put the data science into sports science. So with that, I'm done. Thank you.